If you've ever played Fireboy and Water Girl, you'll know of same keyboard two player games. This is usually where one player plays with WAS and D and a different player plays with the arrow keys. Now, doing this isn't as easy as you think. Or maybe it is. However, that's why this tutorial exists. So let's just jump straight into it. So, you're going to want to come into your Unreal project, and you're going to want anything really. You can work with your current project or a new project like I am in. So, you want a game mode of your choice really, but I did a new game mode for this example, new player controller, really doesn't matter. And you just want to have your own character, so right click, you can do right click, blueprint class, character, and you can create your own new character. I've already got one created, as you can see. I've got a main character, new game mode, new player controller, and I got some movement here. You can have a look at that now. I'll leave it on the screen for a bit. And I'm not going to explain fully what the movement is, but instead of doing all your get control rotation and breaking that, I just get the spring arm. I don't need to go all that complicated. I can just, this is my movement, it works nice. There's a bit of camera lag on the movement, so the camera feels kind of nice rotating, I guess. If I wanted to speed that up, I could just speed it up in the input here, but I'm not going to. Right, so we've got our character, but obviously this is about same keyboard movement. I've got my movement set up here, so there's player 1 and player 2. Oh. Now, obviously, we're going to want to have that working. If we just have two player starts, you'll see it's going to pick randomly between where I should spawn. It's not doing what we want. So what we want to do is open our level blueprint via blueprints, level blueprint. And here we have our blueprint here. So we can drag off begin play. We can create our player. This will create exactly a copy of this, but duplicated. And you can see that. These values are dependent of your default class here and your player controller. It will create it exactly like how spawned. But you can also see that, the player 2 is not moving if I try to use my arrow keys. 1, that's also because we don't have any input, but 2, you might be thinking, well, surely this should work the same because the code, blah, 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 blah. Here's where the issue is. Now, even though this is all set out that it should work dynamically, and both should move, only one controller can take input at a time. This is where it gets a bit complicated. The limitation of this is, like I just explained, only one controller has access to do all the input. And that's the first one. The first player takes all priority. When it's on a networked system, or you have two controllers, that's different, because they'll assign a controller to each other. But imagine you have a controller, which is your keyboard. Player 2 cannot assign itself to the same keyboard because it's already got that assigned. So player 2 doesn't have any input assigned. It cannot take input anymore. So technically, player 2 is just never able to move. This is where we fix that. In your create player, you've got this. What you'll want to do is you'll want to cast this to your new player controller. Actually, no, sorry. You want to get the character from this, so get controlled pawn. Now you'll want to cast this to your new character. What this does is each controller possesses a character. So this possesses that. I can also make it possess other things by using the possess function, but obviously we're not going to get into that. Now, from here, we're just going to compile and save that. In your main character, we're going to make a new variable called player index. And we're going to have that as an integer. And we're going to compile and save that. So by default, you're going to have player index 0, right? And then you can also create a player index 1. We're going to count it by binary. So we don't need to set the player index on the first player because it's already set. What we're going to do is set player index 1. And that sets our player index. But on top of this, we're going to get tags, and we're going to add a tag of player 2. So the reason why we're setting the player index is so we can see who's making calls to functions here. And as we discussed, player 2 can't make input. That's because the reason why we're doing all this is so we can make sure that only player 1 is doing input. Because if you see when we do this, you'll see that, if we print the input, you're getting 1 and 0. That's because player 2 is trying to call this because it can still technically have that input access, but it can't input any access value. So that's the point of this player index. All input has to be from player 0. So we've got this, we've got our player index and our tag. The tag is so we can actually cast to the second player. We're not just gonna get a loop of get an index of all the characters and then see which one's index 2 and index 1 and yeah, no. We're just gonna get all of player 2 tag and then immediately get the first one because we know there's only one, and then there you go. Obviously, you could iterate this if you wanted 4 people. You could do this over and over, or you could for loop it and do a player index -1, player 2, you can do player index +1. So if we did a for loop of, if we did a for loop 1, 2, 3, and then did create player, you can leave that controller ID, but you could do this, and then you could do the index straight into there. No, index +1, or you could even do the first index as 1, and then keep it like that. But you'll obviously want your player 2. What you can do is you can do string to name, and then append, and then you can do player, and then let's take the player index +1, and then you can put that in there, and then you've got, you know, there you go, and then you can add your tag. But obviously we're not going to do that. And I know I find it frustrating in tutorials when people delete stuff, but that's just explaining. So now we got our player 2. We need to get the movement. What we're going to do is we're going to generalize this code, as I call it. We're just going to make an entire new function, well, event, sorry, called rotate, which we can just paste there. Obviously, we're going to make this something there, and that something there, and then continue to drag this out just to make it a bit neat. I say that, but this really isn't neat. We're just going to say controller and input scale. And then we can now do rotate. We'll drag it a bit further. Gonna just refresh nodes. Hang on. No, not. Yeah, no, hang on. I'm getting myself confused. Get controller. But, of course, like I said, we want to make a call to player index. So, we make sure that it's equal to 0. And we do a new branch. I did that by holding B and left clicking, by the way. You can do that. Or you can just drag off and do branch. And then, if it's true, rotate with input scale. And now, that's generalized. We can do the same here. do this and get scale value and compile save, and then we can do movement. But not but we can just copy paste that now. There we go. So now if obviously if I print from here, it's going to give me my zeros, but if I print from here, we'll only see ones. That shows that this is working. But obviously player 2 still can't move, so let's add that code. So I've got this labeled as forward backward player 2, which is obviously my up down movement there. With that, we can literally copy and paste this part, but not the movement part yet. This is where you want to do get actors of tag. Get all actors with tag, sorry. And put your tag as player 2 there. Ooh. And now we can get a copy of 0, cast that to main character, and now we can do the movement. The reason why we do this is we are telling the game that as the first player, because they can only take input, get all actors with tag player 2 as we set here, but because we know there's only one of them, we just get the first one in that, cast that to our main character, and then because under this main character class there's a movement, we can just call that. And it's not the same one, it's a different one because it's the actor, the other actor we're calling. And now we can pretty much just copy that part, do left, right, player 2, paste that, and then do rotate. And then we'll need a get controller from here. Again, we're making this reference from the main character here as that controller to make sure we're not slipping up there. And now with these functions generalized, that made it so much easier that we're not just copying and pasting the same code there. We can save that, hit play, and our first character moves and our second character moves. And I'm using arrow keys for this one, and WASD for that one. Now, if you want to add attacks, you'd obviously run the same sort of code. You'd do your input or whatever, or your F key for attack on the left side, and maybe make a variable down, not a variable, sorry, an event down here about the attack, and then you can do that. And then on this side, you just get the player 2, cast it to main character or whatever your character name is, and then call that function there. Anyways, thanks for watching. That's the video. That is how you do same keyboard multiplayer in Unreal Engine 4. I hope you liked this tutorial. Again, I'm trying to get back into the swing of things. Well, not back into it, but trying to find my style. But I think with that. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all later.